Today's title might confuse you with Matrix, but believe me, it's not. And it might go more into Power Rangers with morphing time, but it's not that either. We have DeepCool MORPHEUS case, which has three varieties or three layouts that you can combine inside the chassis and gives you loads of possibilities when we're talking about liquid cooling, air cooling, and just total reverse design, anything that you can think of. So this case brings us loads of cool options when we're talking about radiator support, fan support, different orientation when we're talking about placement of the power supply with three layouts. You can place on the bottom, standard power supply shroud, on the front, or here in the second compartment, because the third layout actually creates two compartments and still doesn't lose the fourth, I would say, yeah, fourth 420. Well, it isn't a radiator, it's more like three 140mm fans, but we'll get to that part later on without a doubt. The cool thing about this case, we're packed with dust filters, we're packed with pegs to remove the side panels, the top panel, even though we have two thumb screws here at the back. The front is also on pegs, but I do have to mention that those pegs are quite hard to pull out. And the thing is, since we're talking about tempered glass right here on the side, it doesn't have any screws holding it, but the pegs are so tight you really need to be careful while pulling the tempered glass off the chassis. Second thing, some of you might notice if you check their manual or check their website, in the third layout, and this is one of those, this is the third layout, you can't well, obviously you can, but rerouting the USB 2.0 can be tricky in terms of visibility. So if you don't have an AIO, and it would be strange because I don't see any other way of cooling your CPU without an AIO in the third layout, you can just reroute the cable running through in the middle of the tubes. And this is where we go to that some sort of a cable management routine where we do wonders trying to hide those cables nicely, or at least well, just to keep it tidy. So let's start. This case was presented at Computex 2023, and with it we get 3x 140mm fan, which are combined together, and you can separate them. You have two cables running out. One is for addressable RGB that is directly connected to the case and is controlled with the LED button on top, or you could just detach that and connect it to your motherboard to synchronize it with your motherboard software. So it kind of gives you a variety of options. Plus you have 4-pin PWM that is controllable via BIOS or any other software that you have. So they call it the Morpheus, the internal shapeshifter. That's kind of cool because you'll see why. Now, it comes in black and white. You can choose the colors. You get this digital screen showing the GPU and CPU thermals and usage. You can go with Celsius and Fahrenheit, and you already know how it is installed. It's really straightforward. The chamber one is regular position. You have those three 140mm fans on the side. You can accommodate three 140 on the front, three 140 at the top, three 140 at the bottom, and one 100 or one 140mm at the back. Talking about the radiator support, so here we go. In the single chamber one, we can place top, front, and side 420mm radiator. The side is only in the dual chamber compartment. The bottom can also accommodate 420. In the single chamber 2, you can do the same configuration, and then in the dual chamber, well, you already know. So you can place top, front, and the sides 420 and bottom 420 as well, where we go to the point where you can simultaneously place up to three 420mm radiator. In single chamber, the CPU cooler height is maximum at 195mm, dual chamber 132. In addition to everything, if you desire to do so, you can place two 200mm fans on top, front, and bottom, which kind of is quite cool. Now, the interesting part with this case is that you don't get any type of brackets. You have two rails on each side, so you have two rails at the bottom, two rails on the front, and two rails on the top. Plus, additionally, you have one more rail here on the side incorporated with the chassis. This gives you an option to regulate the position of the fans as you wish. You have holes on each end, which give you an option to move those rails according to the fans, according to the position of the components. And this goes well for the front, top and bottom. Quite cool, I do have to say, even though you do have to remove 4 screws. So yeah, it's not that drastical. But to get from the chamber 1 to chamber 2, you need to remove the top cover for the power supply shroud. That takes up 3, 6, 8 screws. Then you have to remove this part right here, which is additional 4 screws. And as you can see, I placed it here, so the screws go 1, 2, 3 and 4. Then you have to remove the motherboard tray from the original back panel. You place the second back panel that you get inside the accessory box and attach the motherboard tray to that one. You need 4 screws for that. Then we need to have another, let's say, holder for the motherboard tray that goes to that part of the chassis, the inner part, which you need 3 additional screws. Now, to mount the whole motherboard tray with both panels, you need 6 screws to lock it here in the position, and to cover up the holes on top and bottom, you need 4 additional screws, so 2 per panel. The cool thing, inside the box, you get a vertical mount for your GPU, 3 slot, and you get a PCI 4 riser, which is quite cool. And the only thing that's with this vertical slot that you need to do, you need to mount it first on your GPU, then mount the PCI riser, and then mount it inside the case. The only issue with this placement, and I'm not talking about vertical mount, I'm not talking about the top cover for the PCI slot, I'm talking about the bottom PCI slot. You can't use a screwdriver to screw it in here unless you do that outside of the box. So yeah, there's that. The whole chassis is well crafted, well designed, really nice steel, loads of openings. It's fully ventilated. I do have to say, the back side, the front, top, bottom, everything, 3 dust filters, everything is breathable. Let's put it that way. But in terms of placing everything as it should be, switching from chamber 1 to chamber 2 and all the other stuff, so doing all the reversed parts to change the motherboard into this position, you do need to read the manual and do everything accordingly to it so you don't make a mistake. So in some scenarios, I would personally place first the top cover, then I would place the motherboard tray, then I would place the bottom cover, right? Because that's the way you go, from top to the bottom, right? In this scenario, you have to place first the motherboard tray, then the top cover, then the bottom cover, because, I don't know, reasons, I guess. But regardless of that, it's really cool. Now let's continue. So it supports E-ATX motherboard in both scenarios. As you can see, I tested it in the standard position and in this dual chamber position. It fits perfectly without any problems. The GPU can go up to 480 millimeters in length in both scenarios. But if you use it in this dual chamber mode and you use a really long GPU, you have to sacrifice this side panel where you have the digital indication of the thermals and usage. One more thing that I'm really fascinated about this case is we have 4 USB 3.0 ports, we have USB Type-C, we have hybrid audio port, that's 4-pole 3.5mm jack for your headset and for your microphone. Then we have the power on and power off button and the LED button. To make it more interesting for you guys, if you really have the time to play around, you get these bits which are rubber square bits, and you can place them on front, on top of the case. You can do wonders. I did 2 DeepCool logos because you only have 1 logo on the case and it was really a shame not to place any logos on it. Talking about materials, we have ABS plus SPCC plus tempered glass. It supports all types of motherboards from Mini ITX to E-ATX. We have 2 3.5-inch drive bays and 2 + 1 2.5-inch drive bays. We have 9 expansion slots, and in both scenarios we have loads of space for the power supply. At the back, in the standard layout, it did look a bit strange because we have a, let's say, a cutout right here in front where you don't have the ability to access too much of the empty space because of the hard drive cage. Well, you can remove it easily. You just flip the case, remove the feet, untie the hard drive cage, or you can just even move it towards the front, it's all up to you. It's attached with 4 screws, and that's all there is to it. Now the motherboard tray at the back has 3 Velcro ties for you to reorganize the cables nicely, and this gives you an option to reroute the cables and make it look nice at the back. As you can see, it really is a shame that the case at the back doesn't have some standoffs or anything similar to that, so that you can use zip ties to tie up those cables quite nicely. You either have to do some, I don't know, chemistry to manage those at the back, because they aren't sticked to anything except for those Velcro ties. But regardless of that, you really do have loads of space. And when I mention space, this is what I encountered. The case is really big in terms of standard case. You get loads of possibilities for your radiators, and that's okay. I have nothing against that. But if you don't use up all the space, so you don't place the fans at the bottom, you don't place the fans at the side, the case will look a bit empty. So this case, even though I have nothing against the LT720 or Assassin 4, this case is mostly, and I would definitely suggest, used for a custom water cooling system. You can really fill up with 420mm rads and go insane, even go with large distro plates and all the other stuff, and just make it work, and that's really cool. So let's go for the benchmarks. In the standard position, I use the Assassin 4 and I use the AMD Ryzen 9 7900X3D. We have here Gainward RTX 4070 Phoenix GS, and in the second dual chamber position, well, third actually, the second one I didn't even test out because it really took some time from the regular position to place it back, because this is practically building the 2 systems. So yeah, so in this dual chamber position, I'm using the DeepCool's LT720, that's 360 AIO, and the same GPU, same processor, everything else is the same. AIDA 64 Extreme Edition CPU in the regular with Assassin 4 went up to 85 degrees, 4800 megahertz, and the GPU went up to 66 degrees. The fascinating thing is not the CPU temperature, not the clock speed, but the GPU. The GPU is actually 65 degrees in this position without any additional fans. CPU is 82 degrees with LT720, that's 3 degrees less, and clock speed went up to 4995 megahertz. But checking out the Cinebench scores, with Assassin 4 in the regular position, we have thermals going from 81 to 83. Clock speeds from 4825 and sticking there throughout the whole 10 tests. And then the benchmark scores started at 26,380, and eventually it did lead up to 26,505, but somewhat on average was 26,450. Cinebench with the LT720 in this dual chamber mode, we have thermals starting at 82, then going 80, and finishing up the last 8 ones with 79 degrees. Constant clock speed was 4850, except for the first one, which was 4825, and benchmark scores started the same way at the lower point at 26,469, but it ended up rising, even going up to 26,587, 570, with an average of 26,540, I would say, something like that. So yeah, there's no downside of switching the positions, going from single chamber to dual chamber. There's literally no problems with that. Of course, with the regular position, you can go with the AIO, but I wanted to give you some diversification where we're talking about two different positions of the motherboard, 2 different positions of the GPU, and the GPU as well doesn't heat up from the tempered glass because it's really a spacious case and it really can get loads of airflow through it, so you don't have to worry about that. This is definitely a quite interesting case without a doubt, and DeepCool, as per usual, surprises with the products, even though you do have to use loads of screws. But in this scenario, I have nothing against it because you're literally having 2-3 different positions inside this case. And I managed to build 2 builds in one day, in this case, with all the screws going on. So it's not that, everything is logical, everything is really straightforward. This was my addition to everything because it doesn't state in the manual that you could place it, but I really want to try it because in the second variety of this case where you don't have the power supply shroud, this goes here. And I decided, well, if the AAO fits here, maybe I could squeeze it in, make it look even nicer. So yeah, it kind of does fit and it does look nice. And that's all there is to it. So all in all, I'm quite satisfied. I think this case does deserve PC Crazy Creative badge, without a doubt, because it is something that you can even improvise. You can improvise with the rails for the fans, for the radiators, maybe even invert the whole case if it's possible and if you try to manage something or mod it or something like that, because this case is leaning towards that, somewhat a modding chassis that you could do wonders with it. And without a doubt, quite interesting to work in. But all in all, if you're interested in any of these products that I mentioned, so LT720, Assassin 4 and the DeepCool MORPHEUS, the star of the show, I'll place the links below for you guys to check out where you can grab them yourself. And that'll be all for today. So don't forget to subscribe at the end, click the like button and click the notification bell just in case you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching. See you very soon, guys. Bye bye.